From the #1 best-selling author of Life Rescripted, you're now tuning in to the Year of Purpose podcast. I'm Zephan Moses Blacksburg. Jenny Beres started a 6-figure freelance copywriting business with nothing but her last $75 in her pocket. And that's exactly why I brought her here today for the Year of Purpose podcast. Jenny, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Zeph. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
So I want to talk a little bit about how did you get to this point of having only $75? I know that you've never really worked a real job in your life. You've always had a business and worked for yourself, and freedom is a huge thing for you. So kind of walk me down that story of how do we get to Jenny with $75?
Well, I think when you live your life where you're like, I'm not going to compromise on things that make me unhappy, sometimes you get really pushed up against a wall that makes you decide. It's kind of the catalyst, right? Like in storytelling and screenplays in television, there's always a catalyst that makes a character decide to walk forward. It's never something that they're necessarily pushed over, but it's something that they're kind of, all corners lead towards that decision. And that's kind of what happened to me. I was really not sure what I knew. I could not work for somebody else. I knew that I did not want the rest of my 9 to 5s, Monday through Friday, for the next 30 years to be spoken for. That was such a tragedy in my mind that blowing through some money to try to figure out what I wanted to do didn't seem that bad in comparison to sacrificing so much of my life. So I took some risks and I bounced around from, I waitressed a little bit. Bad move. I tried, my parents were kind of like, my parents have always been super supportive, but they were like, do something until you figure it out. So I took an office job and I was there, I was there less than a month, and I left at lunch one day and I never came back. Like, I had this cubicle that was like all decked out, and I was really young, so it was like all decked out in like pink file folders and pictures of me and my dogs and me and my boyfriend. Gone. I said I'm going to get a sandwich, and I never came back. And so so that last paycheck whittled down to about $75, and I had to make some decisions. I had to get serious about what it is I did want to do.
Very cool. So when you say that you just kind of walked out for lunch, was that decision like man, this bagel I got for lunch really sucks and everything else sucks and I'm just going to leave anyway? Or was this like this premeditated, like, the whole month period of thinking, this really isn't the right thing for me?
The whole month I was miserable, and I was just trying to figure out, we have this thing that we're ingrained with that's like, you have to be the responsible person. And that responsibility is always directed towards your employer, your family, your friends. And we put very little on self-responsibility. And so I was sitting there trying to say, I have to be responsible. I have to be in this job. But I was not living up I was not being responsible towards myself or honoring the kind of personality I have or even the talents that I have. So I was really suffering, and then that morning, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. At lunch, that's it. So it was premeditated. I don't even know that I ended up getting lunch. I probably went and got a drink, to be totally honest. But but that's kind of how it happened.
That's cool. So I was actually in kind of a similar boat where I didn't have a choice but to leave. I was working for a company at one point in time, and it was actually the first company I worked for out of college. It had been bought out by investors and moved to Chicago, and they basically said, we're not taking you with us. And so, they brought me into a room. I signed the papers with a lawyer that basically said I wasn't going to work there anymore, and went out and got myself a drink. That was the first thing I did. So I know what that feels like, and it was quite interesting because at first, I was sitting there with a couple people I used to work with, and it was just like, there was no question of like what we were going to do next. It was just like, we're just going to kind of sit here and enjoy this freedom of knowing that we don't have a job we have to show up to tomorrow, and then we'll figure it out later.
It's an amazing feeling, right?
Yeah. And I know freedom's like a huge thing for you. It's a big thing for me. It's exactly why I left working for the Apple Store so that I could start my video business, was that I really couldn't have someone else dictating my own schedule and where I needed to be and what I needed to do, especially in that corporate sense of they were always trying to be better and bring in new strategies and things, but didn't really listen to the employees. Like we could give feedback, but being able to get that to climb up the ladder and really make a difference in the company as a whole, especially in a larger company like that, was really hard. So that was one of the big motivators for me to gain freedom in my own life. Now, I think one of the things that comes up for people as well, if you're down to your last $75, how can I just figure out what to do next? Where do I go? And I know that you started with copywriting. That was a big thing that came up for you. How did you realize that copywriting was something that A, you were good at, and B, was something you could make money with?
Well, that's a really good question. So, like a lot of creatives, like a lot of artists, I'm sure you relate to this as well. I had this false way of thinking at first, which was I'm going to be a novelist or a TV writer or a screenwriter, and then my life is going to be financially free. Then I'm going to have money. Then I'm going to have freedom. Then it's going to be great, and I just have to suffer before then. And that is a really big lie. No matter if you're a writer or you're a marketer or a mathematician or a videographer, it doesn't matter. So what I did was I got really honest with myself and I said, I don't have to wait for my writing to take off in the way that I'm thinking about it taking off. There's another way that I can do this. So I really stepped back and was like, my writing is worth something. My talent that I have right now is worth something to somebody now. And so I started looking into who pays writers and what for, and what kind of value is attached to what I can offer. And then it started to go from there. I was like, hey, I'm a good writer. I come up with creative concepts well. I come up with taglines well. And I just started to muscle that into the very beginnings of a business.
Very cool. And so what does your first client look like? Do you remember who that was for you?
I do. He needed a corporate script. He was a creative director who was just starting his own business, and he needed a creative copy. He needed a creative script for a corporate-ish video. He was one of the first people actually to be doing corporate videos because back then people weren't doing a lot of it. And I was able to get him a script, and I was like, I really. He was like, "Have you done this before?" I was like, "Yep." The answer is always yes, everyone. The answer is always yes. You know exactly how to do it. So yeah, he was wonderful, and I worked with him on and off for a couple years until he ended up going into just solely focusing on his short films and features that he was making.
That's awesome. I'm actually really glad that you brought up the whole just saying yes type thing, because I remember when I first got my start, I went to this networking event and I'm like, oh, there's some cool people here. Like, let's see what this is like. And I met this guy who was younger. He was probably the only one in the room that looked like he could have been within 5 years of me. And I'm thinking, okay, at least, we got something in common. We're younger. Maybe we'll get along. Let's see what he's got. And I walk over to him and he explains, I'm a graphic designer. I do a lot of work with sports teams and things like that. And he asks what I do. And I said, oh, I do video. And he said, cool. Have you ever done animations? Like, I might have a need for that in the near future here. I'm working with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Philadelphia Flyers. And, we do a lot of the graphics that go up around their arenas and the stadiums. And I said, oh, yeah, sure, totally. And I had never done animation. Well, I'd done like a little bit maybe in high school, but I had like never done animation. And I just said yes. And I'm thinking, 2 seconds later, I'm like, who am I kidding? I've never done this. Uh-oh, I guess I'll just have to figure it out. And sure enough, like a month later, he reached out and was like, hey, man, we want you to do a full arena takeover during a hockey game where your stuff is going to be on every screen in the arena. And I'm just like, oh dear God, what did I do? What did I create? It's a monster. And I found a way. I met a great freelancer through a site. At the time it was called elance.com. Now it's called Upwork. I'm sure you've heard of it. And I met an awesome freelancer who did these 3D graphics for me, and they totally loved it. And then I got to say that all my stuff was showing inside of NHL arenas.
It's awesome. That is so awesome. That's such a great story. That's the way it's done, though. You're never going to be you're never going to be qualified enough in your own mind. If you sit around and wait to be qualified enough to start your business or take on a client, you just won't take that step. It's like trying to learn a different language. You could study French all you want from, Los Angeles, but it's not until you go to France and stay for 6 months that you're really going to maneuver your way around the language in a way that's natural. And that the same thing goes for a freelance business or any business, I imagine, but especially when you're freelancing there. And it's not really faking it till you make it. It's being willing to get paid to enhance your craft and know that you have the talent and move forward on that.
And I was going to ask you too, is there sort of this balancing act in your head before you go and make that decision to say yes of like, A, is this something that I might be able to pull off? B, is this something I definitely can't pull off in a million years? C, should I just flip a coin 50-50 and say whatever comes out first? Like, do you have to balance that out? Because if I had said that and didn't have the proper resources to at least know where I could find an animator, then, I would have had to go back and say, oh man, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. Have you ever gotten to a point where maybe you do say yes to something and then you kind of have to go back on that because it's just not within your specialties?
Well, I think the answer is now very few of us are going to be in a situation where someone's going to say, "Hey, can you create pharmaceutical drugs or can you create, that new iCar?" And we're going to say, "Yeah, we can do it." And then we can't. The things that you're drawn to, if you're excited about something, but you're just a little nervous or a little scared that you can't pull it off, you're going to be able to pull it off because you're talking to people about something that's in your wheelhouse. The conversation would never have gotten that far with you and the person that you ran into who offered you this gig if you didn't feel comfortable saying that you were a video person, a videographer. So in my experience, I only spoke about the things that I was actually talented at.
Right.
So I didn't end up getting into situations where I had to say, sure, I can, write these math equations for you, because never in a million years would that happen. So I think it's one of those things, if something excites you and makes you feel good first, if that's your first reaction, then go for it. If your first reaction is like, oh, wow, this is not my thing, then honor that.
Right. And I think that when we're looking at the things we're talented at and what we're capable of, I think we don't always give ourselves nearly as much credit as we deserve. I think I've got plenty of friends who have come to me and they've said, well, I've got nothing. I worked the same job for the last 6 years. I don't know where to go from here and I can't keep doing the same thing. And I said, well, look at what you're doing in your job. It's not that you are, I'm probably going to give a really bad example here, but let's just say you are that guy that fixes the pin resetters at the bowling alley, right? Like, okay, you're good with your hands, you're good at fixing stuff, you're good at critical thinking. I mean, there are all these different skills that you have that you don't realize because we too often identify with what we do as opposed to what we have to call upon when we are doing our job.
That's a great way to put it. You have a sub skill set inside of that larger thing that you define yourself as. So you just have to peel away the label, peel away what you define yourself as, and then break down the traits of what that is, what that looks like, what do you offer. So that's a great example.
Awesome. So let me ask you, when getting this business off the ground, getting things started, a lot of things tend to come into play. We've got to get a business banking account. We usually get an LLC or get a lawyer and things like that. What were some things that maybe you put into place that helped you be more productive or even just, with making sure that you were efficient and effective? Like, I know some people get stuck with, they try to answer their email the second it comes in. If the phone buzzes on the table or beeps, like they've got to grab the phone and answer right away. Are there any certain, rules you've put into place or guidelines for yourself just to make sure that, you can still have that freedom and that the business doesn't take over the whole rest of your day?
When I first started, I didn't have, I just jumped right into the work. I just jumped in right into finding clients, and talking about my business. Talking about my business was my number one priority. Everything else came second to that, except for obviously completing contracts and things like that. And the reason why is because that's the fastest way to start building your business, is just talk about it to everybody who will possibly listen with a genuine amount of enthusiasm, so that, because you don't know what people are working on. As I got older, as I started to get more and more business and more that I could handle, I did have to start putting rules in place. And I say rules, like, you can't see me, but I'm doing like the little, like the little things with my fingers,
Air
because
quotes.
yes, thank you. I couldn't think of it. Air quotes with my fingers, because I'm not a rule follower. But for the most part, I don't get up and check my email first thing. This has been really important for me, because I think when you are working with clients and you're providing a service, it can be really easy to get up first thing, check your email, and then start your day based on what somebody else wants you to do, as opposed to the priorities that you had in line for your morning. So I give myself about an hour in the morning to figure out what my priorities are during the day. That's usually when I'll decide when I'm going to, I'll do a couple things. I will respond to some emails after that. Maybe I'll take another hour and just do some response on social media, emails, and then after that, I do whatever it is that I had to do. But I never start the day with somebody else dictating how my morning's going to start.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's a really big thing to keep in mind, is that your schedule is yours until other people get in the way. The second you touch your phone or your email, that's when your schedule is no longer yours, and people start to take over, because, that one email that came through that, has something that you need to do as soon as possible. I mean, there's so many things that can pop up that can just throw a corkscrew in the schedule. And I think that it's really important to keep your boundaries. Know when the phone needs to go on do not disturb. Know when you're going to take a break from answering email or phone calls for the day. And I've been sharing with a lot of people lately, I schedule my emails sometimes. I'll answer them at 9 or 10 o'clock at night when I'm actually sitting down to look at my email, but I'll schedule it to go out at like 7:30 in the morning. So it looks like, I'm answering to people first thing in the morning and getting up and doing that, but I don't usually get back to them until like the next day. And it kind of sets people into this mindset of thinking, oh, like, here's the times where he's available and easily reached, and here's the time where he's not.
Yes, that's a great thing to do. That's really wonderful that you're scheduling that. And that's a good point. If you are answering emails like a crazy person, like at all hours, in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, you're not building your business. You're not doing the other things that you need, and you're setting a precedent that I can be, whatever I'm doing is less important than what you're sending over to me. And that's kind of how you create monster clients. You create the clients that they want it right now. They don't know what they want, but they want it right now.
Yeah.
and those are the kind that are best avoided.
Yeah.
But we create them at the same time.
And I think you're absolutely right. We feed fuel to the fire. And so you have to be really cautious with that. One thing I was going to ask too is that, you've been very good about building your business. How do you, first I was going to ask, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you build your lifestyle and then create the business around it? Or did you create the business and then kind of reframe the lifestyle after the business was made?
I've always had the same lifestyle. I just made more money to enhance that lifestyle, if that makes sense. So I just expanded on my lifestyle once the business was created. But I was pretty set in my ways. Like, I was very much, I had to be able to travel when I wanted to. I had to have, the flexible schedule to do what I wanted to do, and write when I wanted to write, the things that I cared about, the creative projects. So all of those things, and a certain level of living that I was accustomed to. I like to eat out. I like to drive nice cars. I like to live in, urban areas. So those things were kind of already in place, minus the urban area. I didn't come to LA until 5 years ago, but the business helped me expand on that.
Totally. And I think that it's really important to make sure that how you want to have your life set up. But at the same time, I wanted to ask, a lot of people are calling this sort of generation of people in their mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, this selfish sort of me generation. And I completely disagree with that, for starters, just to throw my opinion out there. But what do you think about everyone coming in and saying, oh, well, it's bunch of selfish kids who, just think that they can live the way they want to? And I think it's true. I think we can live the way they want to. But what do you think about that, Jenny?
I think two things about that. First of all, I don't like broad stroking. I think when you start broad stroking a group of people, it's when you start to get, that's when things get dangerous. Saying, all millennials do this, or all, baby boomers do that, or whatever. I think that's a dangerous and a false way of thinking to begin with. I just think that there's a lot of illogic there. But speaking to putting aside maybe the few people that don't want to work, because there's people who don't want to work in every generation, so fine. Putting aside and saying, as a group, are millennials selfish? No, I think we grew up with the internet. I think that we see things differently because we've had a different experience. Business and industry to us is digital. That's
Mm-hmm.
and our parents and our grandparents, they don't see that. They just see us glued to a screen, and so it looks lazy to them. It looks like we're not really doing anything or figuring out our life. And I also think, it's probably bold to say, but I also think there's a lot of fear in what you don't understand. And I think that the older generations don't understand how the digital age works. They don't understand that you can be a millionaire off of YouTube. They don't understand. And to them, it doesn't look like hard work, even though it's very hard work to make millions off the internet. So I don't think we're lazy. I think that, and I don't even know that they would think we were lazy if they understood all the work that went into what we do.
Right.
I just think that they worked really hard. They think we're kind of spewing it's too good to be true. They don't see exactly what it takes to build the kind of lives that we're talking about building. And so there's a disconnect of understanding.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right there with just having a disconnect of understanding. I mean, I was talking to my little brother just yesterday, who's been interning with me for a little while now, and he was saying, oh, do you know this guy on YouTube? He makes all these prank and funny videos and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen a couple of those videos. And he said, yeah, he makes $12 million a year off of YouTube. That. I'm like, whoa, you mean the guy who wore women's leggings and bent over in the trunk of his car to pretend like he was a woman trying to fish stuff out of his trunk to see how many guys would, respond to it, is making $12 million a year? And he's like, yeah.
I love it.
Wow. So, I mean, it's the people with these creative, entertaining, and funny ideas that really are crushing it. And I think that, as long as they're going out there and putting all their effort into what they really want to do, and for that guy who's making a lot of people laugh, you can get paid for it. Now, the one thing to ask as we kind of circle off the episode here is, how do we figure out what's next? For you, it was very easy to look at some of your skill sets and say, okay, I've got $75, here's where I get started. I think some other people are still stuck in this mindset of thinking that they'll never really find the thing that they truly love. And I think they're wrong, for starters, but I just wonder, where do we go to even start to find these things that we're passionate about?
If you're not sure about what you love, I don't think you're listening hard enough, because what you love is hidden in the things that you can't resist doing, the things you can't resist thinking about. But we'll put that aside, and let's say that you really at this moment feel very convoluted about that. Go back to what you're good at. Go back to what you're good at. Go back to what comes easy to you. And then ask yourself, what kind of value would this have for somebody else? And where would that value be placed? Would a business be able to use it? Would a solopreneur be able to use it? How could I turn this into something that somebody else would find valuable? How could I turn this into something that would make someone else's life easier? Because a lot of times the things that we're excellent at, other people struggle with. I mean, I can't do basic math, so I think that we just have to go back and really listen and examine what we're good at, and passion is such a complicated word. And I think passion can really trip people up. I think it can be a huge roadblock. So take passion out of it and just examine what it is that you're good at.
I think that's awesome. I think you're right with, we question ourselves in a way where it's so much harder to answer. We always say, what is my passion? What am I passionate about? What am I supposed to do? And then when we don't come up with an answer, we get even more and more frustrated. Now, the good news for you on the math front is that I actually found an app recently where you can hold your camera over an equation written out on a piece of paper and it will solve it in front of your eyes on your phone, which is ridiculous.
That is incredible.
But the guy who created that, who was really passionate about math, probably won and made a lot of money.
Yes, probably. That's amazing. I probably will download that. Like, no, pure transparency here. I will probably download that.
But yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. We don't really ask the right questions because we try to ask what everyone else is asking, and what we see in all those headlines of the articles of 10 ways to find your passion and purpose. Well, that's 10 ways out of, a million. Look how many chances that we had to take just to get the light bulb created properly. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And you might be passionate about several things. Like I have lots of things that I don't use the word passionate very often, but I have lots of things that I love. And so you may have lots of things that you love. It may not just be, one thing. And I also think we have to be careful of really going back and examining what we say that we want, because I noticed this a lot, and I've noticed it with myself, that we'll stick to a story that we've had. I want this kind of job. Oh, this would be my dream, X, Y, and Z. But if you're not taking any steps towards it, and it's not something that you're constantly thinking about, or it may be time to reevaluate your story. And I think that a lot of people have trouble reevaluating, because once we say, oh, this is what we want, we kind of just tell ourselves that story on autoplay, and we never really go back and examine it. So like with my clients, I always have them go back and examine, what is it? Because they'll say, well, I really want to, do this or do that, or I really want to have a cosmetics line one day, or this and that. And then you realize it's just a story they've been telling themselves for 10 years. But the reason they haven't been taking steps towards it is because they don't really care.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that you're absolutely right. People don't care. They think that they do. They say that they do, but they really don't. Mm-hmm. And so it's about finding that thing that really does kind of set you off, where there was a great example. I was at an event and we brought up a certain topic, and I just went off in a heated discussion for like 20 minutes about it. And they were like, you see that? You see the fire he had in talking about that? Like, that is what he needs to stay with.
That's so awesome. Yeah, go to a networking event and get into an argument, and then you'll find where you're supposed to be.
Totally. Well, Jenny, it's been awesome having you here. If we had any just sort of one final word of wisdom to give to everyone, let's just say if they're in a similar place where they don't have a whole lot of money, they're really ready to just try something different and take a leap, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to just jump in. The number one reason we create our own clients. And if you talk about your business and you just say, I have this business, that's it, and you talk about it and you have conversations with people, you will start creating clients. You will start creating clients before you register an LLC, before you open up a banking account that's a business banking account. It takes conversation. It takes just jumping in and saying, this is what I do. You don't need the website yet. You don't need all of that stuff. You just have to start doing. And that starts with a conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely talking about it. I think that the only way that people have become known for what they do is because they just tell everyone. Back when I did CrossFit, everyone was just like, oh, Zephan doesn't shut up about CrossFit. And I think that's one of those things, is that's how it spreads, is you just have to talk about it all the time, and it's going to settle in, and people are going to remember you are the go-to person for that one thing.
Mm-hmm. It's also how you talk yourself into believing that you are something before you have the bank account to prove it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jenny, it's been awesome having you here. What's the best place for people to go to find more information about you and what you're doing now?
Thank you so much. They can go to jennyberes.com and you can learn more about how I coach people into starting their own successful freelance writing businesses. And I also have a blog on there you could check out if you want to start right away.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, and we certainly look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Hey everyone, it's Zeph. Did you like this episode? Be sure to subscribe so that you can tune in next week and tell a friend about the show. If you want access to free training and exclusive interviews on success, happiness, lifestyle design, and adventure, visit me at yearofpurpose.com. Until next time, go out and let life surprise you so that you can live a life rescripted.